Hospitals, sanctuaries of hope during the day, transform into something unrecognizable at night. Beneath the hum of machines and the sterile glow of fluorescent lights, there's an unsettling stillness. A stillness that feels wrong. Staff have whispered about footsteps echoing down empty hallways. Patients speak of shadows that move when no one is there. And then there are the screams, muffled, distant, but unmistakably human, coming from rooms that should be silent. Tonight, you'll hear 3 stories. 3 encounters that defy reason. Stories from people like you, who walked into a hospital expecting healing, but left carrying something far heavier, memories of the unexplained. Are you ready to listen? Because once you do, you may never look at hospitals the same way again. Hospitals, where the boundary between life and death is thinner than anywhere else. A place where the energy of birth, tragedy, and final goodbyes lingers, invisible but heavy, in the air. For many, they're places of hope. But for others, there's something far darker. Late night shifts. Empty halls. The feeling of being watched, though no one is there. These are not just stories, they're experiences that countless people have carried with them, too afraid to speak out, lest no one believe them. Tonight, we will journey through the chilling accounts of 3 hospitals haunted by something otherworldly. First, the spectral nurse who never left her post, still comforting patients decades after her death. Then, an abandoned hospital wing where laughter and voices echo, despite being sealed off for years. And finally, the most terrifying of all, the cursed room that no one dares enter, where the walls themselves seem alive with whispers of the past. Stay with me until the end, because the final story has left even the staunchest skeptics questioning their reality. You won't forget it, no matter how hard you try. Story 2, The Voices from the Abandoned Wing. Hospitals grow with time, their wings expanding to accommodate the sick and the injured. But not every space gets to serve its purpose forever. In a bustling urban hospital, one wing was sealed off decades ago due to an asbestos scare. Its doors locked, its windows boarded up, its hallways dark and forgotten. For years, the abandoned wing was a silent void, or so everyone thought. That is, until renovations began. The hospital administration decided to reopen the space to meet rising demands. Contractors and workers were hired to renovate the old wing, but almost immediately, they started reporting strange occurrences. At first, it was small things, tools disappearing from locked toolboxes, lights flickering in rooms with no power. But as the weeks went on, the unease grew. The janitorial staff were the first to speak up. One man, working the late shift, was mopping the hallway adjacent to the abandoned wing. As his mop swished across the tiles, he heard faint whispers, like a conversation just out of earshot. He froze, straining to listen, but the whispers stopped. Thinking it was his imagination, he resumed his work until he heard it again. This time, it was unmistakable, soft, childlike laughter, coming from behind the locked doors of the abandoned wing. Security guards began to experience similar events. During their night rounds, they heard loud bangs echoing from the sealed wing. At first, they assumed it was vandals or animals, but every time they investigated, they found nothing. One night, a construction worker stayed late to finish repairs. As he measured drywall in an empty room, he heard a faint voice behind him. It was soft and melodic, like a child calling his name. He turned, his heart pounding, but the room was empty. Thinking he was overtired, he tried to ignore it, But then he saw it, a dusty doll lying in the middle of the floor. He hadn't noticed it before. Its head was tilted, its glass eyes staring directly at him. Terrified, he backed out of the room, only to hear the same voice again, this time louder. The child was calling his name, begging him to stay. He ran, leaving his tools behind. But the most chilling encounter came just weeks later. A small team of workers was assigned an overnight shift to finish repairs on the electrical system. One of them, a seasoned contractor who prided himself on his skepticism, was working alone in the main hallway. Suddenly, the silence was broken by the unmistakable sound of running footsteps. He looked up, expecting to see his colleagues, but what he saw froze him in place. A group of children, at least 5 or 6, ran down the hall, their laughter echoing off the walls. They were dressed in old-fashioned clothes, their faces pale and blurry, as if they weren't fully there. He called out to them, but they didn't respond. Instead, they turned a corner and vanished. When he checked the security footage later, there was no one on the tape. Just an empty hallway. After this, the workers began refusing to enter the wing. The foreman, frustrated by the delays, insisted they finish the job, but every attempt was met with new disturbances. Lights that were fixed flickered again. Tools went missing. Loud bangs echoed through the halls, even in the presence of multiple witnesses. One man even claimed he felt a hand tug on his shirt when he was working alone. The renovation project was quietly abandoned. The wing remains sealed to this day, its darkened halls left to whatever, or whoever, still lingers there. Visitors who pass by its locked doors sometimes report hearing faint laughter or the sound of running footsteps. Some believe the children are the spirits of young patients who died in the hospital long ago. Others think it's something darker, mimicking the innocent to lure the living inside. Children's laughter may send a chill down your spine, but at least it feels innocent. What if the spirit haunting you isn't a child? What if it's something far more malevolent? The next story is one that haunts even the most skeptical minds, a cursed hospital room where no one leaves unchanged. Story 3, The Patient in Room 313. In the quiet halls of a rural medical center, one room stands out, Room 313. It looks no different from the others: white walls, a single bed, and a window overlooking a grove of trees. But for decades, whispers among the staff and patients have told a different story. They say the room is cursed, and those who stay there are never the same again. It all began in the 1980s with a patient named Mr. Grayson. Mr. Grayson was admitted to room 313 with what seemed to be routine chest pain. His condition deteriorated rapidly over the next 3 days. Doctors couldn't explain why. Then, on the 4th night, he was found dead, his face frozen in a look of pure terror. The official cause of death was a heart attack, but his family insisted something sinister had happened. They claimed he'd called them earlier that evening, whispering about a man who stood at the foot of his bed, watching him as he slept. The hospital dismissed the claims as grief-stricken delusions. But the staff began to notice something strange. Patients assigned to room 313 often left it worse than they arrived. It wasn't long before the stories started to pile up. Patients who spent the night in room 313 complained of vivid nightmares. Many described seeing a shadowy figure standing over their bed, its features obscured but its presence undeniably menacing. Some said the figure whispered to them, though they could never remember the words. Others woke up paralyzed, unable to move as the figure loomed closer. Nurses on the night shift reported strange noises coming from the room when it was supposed to be empty, soft tapping on the window, even though room 313 was on the 3rd floor. One nurse claimed she heard faint breathing as she passed by the door, only to find the room unoccupied. One particularly unsettling incident involved a young doctor working late to review charts. It was past midnight when he glanced toward room 313 and saw a man sitting on the edge of the bed, his head bowed. Thinking it was a patient who'd wandered into the wrong room, the doctor entered, calling out to him. But the room was empty. The bed was undisturbed. The most terrifying encounter came during a power outage one stormy night. The hospital was running on emergency generators, and the halls were bathed in dim, flickering light. A nurse, tasked with checking on each room, hesitated as she approached room 313. She could feel the air grow colder, her breath visible in front of her. Gathering her courage, she pushed the door open. Inside, she saw a man lying in the bed, his face turned toward her. His eyes were wide open, unblinking. He looked wrong. His skin was pale and stretched too tightly over his skull, his mouth slightly open as if he was about to speak. Suddenly, the lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness. In the brief moment of light, she saw the man sit up, his head snapping toward her. A voice, low and guttural, whispered, "Get out." The nurse screamed, stumbling backward as the door slammed shut on its own. When the power returned moments later, she found the room empty. The bed was neatly made, as if no one had been there. Word of the nurse's experience spread quickly, and room 313's reputation grew darker. The hospital administration began assigning the room sparingly, but the reports only intensified. Patients continued to see the shadowy figure. Staff refused to enter the room alone. Eventually, the hospital made a decision. Room 313 was sealed off, marked with a simple sign that read "out of order." Today, room 313 remains locked. Those who pass by claim they can still hear the faint sound of tapping on the window or whispers seeping through the cracks in the door. Some say the figure Mr. Grayson described wasn't just watching him, it was waiting. Waiting for someone else to occupy its space. Hospitals are meant to be places of healing, but as these stories have shown, they can also be places where the line between the living and the dead blurs. The next time you find yourself in a hospital room, take a moment to look around. Listen closely. And remember, you might not be as alone as you think. Would you like to include an outro and engagement prompts to wrap up the video? Margaret, the devoted nurse who continued her rounds long after her untimely death. The abandoned wing, echoing with the ghostly laughter of unseen children. In room 313, where a shadowy figure waits, watching, haunting anyone who dares to step inside. These are not just tales of the paranormal, they are a reminder of something far more unsettling, that in places meant to heal and comfort, the veil between the living and the dead might be thinner than we think. Hospitals are places of healing, but they are also places of transition, where life begins and ends, and sometimes lingers. What if these stories are more than just urban legends? What if they are warnings? The next time you find yourself walking through a quiet hospital hallway, take a moment to listen. Pay attention to the shadows. And ask yourself, is there something standing just behind you? Thank you for joining us tonight. If these stories gave you chills, let us know in the comments below. Have you ever experienced something unexplainable in a hospital? Share your story, we'd love to hear it. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more bone-chilling tales. Until next time, stay safe, and stay aware. Thank you for joining us on this terrifying journey through haunted hospital halls. If you found yourself holding your breath, staring over your shoulder, or questioning every creak of the floor beneath you, then we've done our job. If you enjoyed these stories, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more bone-chilling tales from the unknown. Now, we want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced something unexplainable in a hospital? Maybe you felt eyes on you, or heard footsteps when no one was there. Share your story in the comments below. Who knows, it might just be the next one we explore.